Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some seriously cool Buddhist practices.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for achieving liberation. They're called Recollection of Stilling and Mindfulness of Death.
Wow.
We'll be exploring excerpts from a meditator's tools, specifically the chapters dedicated to these practices.
Okay.
So think of this deep dive as your shortcut to understanding these complex but fascinating concepts. We'll pull out the most compelling points and offer some fresh perspectives. What do you think?
Sound good? Sounds great.
All right, to kick things off, let's talk about recollection of stilling.
Okay.
Now, the core idea here is to achieve true inner peace and freedom
Right.
by completely uprooting greed, malice, and ignorance from our minds. I can already feel my stress levels decreasing just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a profound concept.
It is.
And MN 140 really drives this home with a powerful metaphor. It compares abandoning these unwholesome roots to uprooting a palm tree.
Okay.
Signifying, complete eradication, leaving no chance for them to sprout again.
So no more mental weeds.
Exactly.
I love that analogy. It makes so much sense. But how do we actually go about uprooting these deeply ingrained mental habits?
Right.
AN 9.36 mentions something called the first jhana as being key to ending these mental effluents. What exactly does that mean?
So the jhanas are states of deep meditative absorption.
Okay.
Imagine being so engrossed in something that all the usual mental chatter just fades away.
Oh, okay.
That sense of focused calm where your mind feels crystal clear, that's a taste of jhana. And each jhana progressively refines your awareness and detaches your mind from sensory distractions.
Okay, so it's not just about zoning out. It's about actively engaging with your mind in a specific way to cultivate deep focus and clarity.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it.
And as you repeatedly engage with the jhanas, you cultivate greater mental mastery.
Oh, okay.
Eventually reaching a point where you can completely transcend the cycle of suffering.
Wow.
Think of it like an archer practicing on a straw man.
Okay.
With repeated practice, they become incredibly skilled at hitting the target. Eventually, they're able to shoot, long distances and pierce even great masses. Similarly, by repeatedly engaging with Ṭhāna, you train your mind to reach the ultimate target, liberation.
That's a great analogy, but the book also mentions something called the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception.
Right.
That sounds a bit mind-boggling, to be honest.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult to grasp intellectually.
Okay.
Think of it like trying to explain the taste of chocolate to someone who's never had it before.
Okay, yeah.
You could describe it using words, but the true understanding comes from direct experience.
So you're saying the best way to understand this dimension is to actually experience it through meditation?
Precisely.
Okay.
The Buddha himself said that these advanced states are best understood through direct meditative experience.
Fair enough. I'm intrigued to learn more, but perhaps we should move on for now. One passage from ID 90 really stood out to me. It claims that dispassion is the supreme quality and those who cultivate it reap supreme rewards. That makes me think about how often I get caught up in clinging to I and mine. Do you ever struggle with that?
Absolutely. Cultivating dispassion is key because it directly addresses the root cause of suffering, craving.
Right.
When we are free from craving, we're no longer bound by the endless cycle of seeking pleasure and avoiding the thing.
Okay.
And you are right to connect this to the idea of construing, as mentioned in MN 140.
Right.
That passage equates clinging, which it calls construing with disease and suffering. True peace comes from letting go of these limiting constructs.
So dispassion is kind of like the ultimate mental detox.
Exactly.
And the reward for this deep cleansing is something truly incredible. UD 8.1 describes this sublime state, a dimension beyond all worldly constructs where suffering completely ceases to exist.
It's a dimension that transcends our usual conceptions of space, consciousness, and nothingness.
Wow.
A state of pure, unconditioned peace where there's no coming, going, staying, or passing away.
Wow. UD 8.2 really captures this beautifully. It emphasizes that craving can only be pierced by direct knowing, leading to a state of profound emptiness for the one who sees.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
It highlights that liberation isn't about adding something new to our experience, but rather removing the veil of ignorance that obscures the true nature of reality.
It's like finally seeing the world without any filters. Speaking of seeing clearly, UD 8.3 talks about the unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated. What do you make of that?
It suggests that liberation isn't about creating something new, but realizing what has always been, that our true nature is already free from suffering.
That's a really comforting thought, and UD 8.4 builds on this, stating that true freedom comes from inner independence, a state of unshakable calm that dissolves desire and breaks the cycle of rebirth.
Exactly, and MN 140 sheds light on how we can cultivate this inner independence. It encourages us to let go of clinging to I and mine. The more we identify with these fleeting concepts, the more we suffer.
So the key to lasting happiness is to detach from these limiting constructs of self and embrace the freedom that comes from recognizing our true nature.
It's a process of letting go and realizing that we are not our thoughts, emotions, or experiences.
It reminds me of the verses from DHP 202-203, which liken passion to fire and emphasize that no bliss surpasses the peace attained through understanding the true nature of reality.
Absolutely. When we truly understand that everything is impermanent, interconnected, and ultimately empty of inherent self, we can finally find lasting peace and fulfillment.
It sounds like Recollection of Stilling is all about cultivating this deep understanding through meditation and mindful awareness.
Yes.
But now I'm curious about mindfulness of death, a practice that sounds a bit paradoxical, to be honest.
It does seem paradoxical, doesn't it? But stay tuned, because next we'll explore how this seemingly morbid practice can actually enhance life.
I'm all ears.
So we were just talking about mindfulness of death. It's not about dwelling on death in a morbid way,
Right.
but rather using it as a skillful tool to cultivate a sense of urgency
Okay.
and prioritize what truly matters.
That makes sense. It's kind of like a wake-up call to appreciate the preciousness of life and not waste it on things that ultimately don't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And AN 5.57 highlights this beautifully.
Okay.
It explains how contemplating the universality of death can help weaken our attachment to fleeting pleasures and motivate us towards the liberating path.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how your own perspective shifts when you become aware of your own mortality?
Definitely. When I hear about someone my age passing away, it makes me stop and reevaluate my own priorities. It's a stark reminder that our time here is limited.
It's a powerful reminder to make the most of each moment.
Right.
And speaking of making the most of our time,
Yeah.
AN 6.19 offers a fascinating anecdote about two groups of monks.
Okay.
One group was fixated on clinging to life, while the other saw each breath as a precious opportunity for spiritual progress.
Okay, that reminds me of something. I read an article recently about a study on people facing terminal illness. The ones who focused on finding meaning and connection, despite their prognosis, actually reported a higher quality of life
Right.
than those who just focused on extending their lifespan.
That's a great example of how our mindset and approach to death can have a profound impact on our experience of life.
Right.
And it ties back to that concept of construing we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
The monks who clung to life were essentially construing their existence as something separate and permanent.
Right, and that kind of clinging just leads to more suffering because it's based on an illusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And AN 6.20 offers some incredibly detailed instructions for cultivating mindfulness of death.
Okay.
The Buddha guides us to reflect on potential causes of death to help identify and abandon any remaining unskillful qualities. It's like using the awareness of death as a motivator for personal growth.
So it's not about being afraid of death,
Right.
but rather using that awareness to inspire us to live more ethically and make the most of each day.
Precisely. And SN 3.25 contains a truly captivating dialogue between the Buddha and King Pasenadi
Okay.
that illustrates this point beautifully. Even with all his worldly power and resources, the king is utterly helpless in the face of death.
It's a humbling reminder that no amount of wealth or status can protect us from the inevitability of death.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in that dialogue, only Dhamma practice offers true refuge.
That makes me think about how often we place our sense of security in external things that are ultimately impermanent.
It's a common trap, but the good news is that we have the power to shift our focus inward, to cultivate qualities like wisdom and compassion that provide true and lasting refuge.
That leads perfectly into the verses that follow in SN 3.25. They're incredibly powerful, using vivid imagery to liken aging and death to unstoppable mountains, crushing everything in their path.
It's a stark reminder of the urgency of seeking true refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha.
Right.
Not refuge in the sense of escaping from life, but rather finding a solid foundation of wisdom and compassion to navigate the inevitable ups and downs.
And amidst all this talk about death and impermanence, MN 131 offers some really beautiful and practical advice. It encourages us to focus on living fully in the present moment, as tomorrow is uncertain.
It's a reminder to embrace life fully, with a sense of gratitude and appreciation for every moment, rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
That resonates so deeply with me.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in our plans and anxieties.
Right.
But ultimately, all we have is this present moment.
And that's where the true potential for joy and liberation lies. AN 4.184 portrays an individual who has eradicated clinging and achieved a deep understanding of the Dhamma.
Okay.
Even in the face of death, they remain free from fear and despair.
Wow, that's inspiring to think that it's possible to reach a state of such profound inner peace and fearlessness.
It is possible, and these practices are the tools that can help us get there. Now remember that intriguing metaphor in SN 44.9.
Yeah.
The one comparing the sustenance of a flame carried by the wind to the craving that fuels rebirth.
Oh yeah, that really stuck with me. It's like if we want true freedom, we need to figure out what cravings are fueling our own personal fire.
Exactly.
Okay.
By recognizing and uprooting craving, we can break free from the cycle of suffering and attain true liberation.
Right.
And both recollection of stilling and mindfulness of death are powerful practices for doing just that.
So they work together to help us identify and extinguish the flames of craving that keep us bound to suffering.
Precisely.
Okay.
They're like two sides of the same coin, both leading us towards a state of profound inner freedom.
It's incredible to think that these ancient practices can be so relevant to our lives today.
They are timeless wisdom teachings, offering guidance and support on our journey towards greater peace and fulfillment.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a renewed sense of inspiration to delve deeper into these practices.
Me too. And you know what's really fascinating?
What?
Is how these practices also influence our perception of the world around us. Remember Maharaj's question to the Buddha
Oh, yeah.
about how to avoid being seen by the king of death?
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. What was the Buddha's answer again?
The Buddha's advice was to view the world as empty, always mindful to have removed any view about self. By doing so, one transcends death's grasp.
It's about recognizing the impermanence and interconnectedness of all things,
Yes.
including ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay.
When we let go of our clinging to a fixed sense of self, we become liberated from the fear of death. It's like the fear loses its grip when there's no self to cling to life. And this ties back beautifully to the concept of recollection of stilling.
It's like both practices are encouraging us to let go of clinging, whether it's to our sense of self, our desires, or our aversions.
Exactly. And remember, this freedom isn't some distant goal to be achieved in the future. It's available to us right here, right now, in the present moment.
Yeah, it's amazing how these practices offer such a different way of looking at life and death. It's not about escaping or fearing, but understanding and embracing.
It's a profound shift in perspective. And AN 9.36 really highlights how transformative this shift can be through the power of the jhanas. Remember our archer analogy?
Totally. The more we practice, the more skilled we become at hitting the target of liberation.
Exactly. By repeatedly engaging with the jhanas, we train our minds to become more focused, stable, and less reactive to the ups and downs of life.
And as we progress through the jhanas, we shed those layers of clinging and maybe even get a glimpse of that dimension of neither perception nor non-perception.
Right. And even if we don't reach those advanced states, simply engaging with the jhanas can have a huge impact on our daily lives. It's like training for a marathon. Even if we don't finish the race, we'll be in much better shape than when we started.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've got recollection of stilling, working on quieting the mind, and cultivating deep focus. How does mindfulness of death fit into this picture?
Where AN 6.20 offers some really practical guidance for cultivating mindfulness of death. It encourages us to regularly reflect on potential causes of death as a way to identify and abandon any remaining unskillful qualities. It's like using the awareness of death as a motivator to clean up our mental house, so to speak.
It's like if we knew we only had a limited time left, what would we want to change about ourselves? What kind of legacy would we want to leave behind?
Exactly. By recognizing the potential for death at any moment, we're inspired to live more ethically, cultivate positive qualities, and make the most of our time. And AN 6.9 reminds us to approach this practice with a sense of urgency. The monks who were most successful saw each breath as a precious opportunity for progress, rather than clinging to the hope of living a long life.
So it's not about obsessing over death, but rather using it as a reminder to truly live in the present moment.
Exactly. And remember King Pasenadi's story from SN 3.25. Despite all his wealth and power, he was ultimately helpless in the face of death.
It's a powerful reminder that true security and happiness can't be found in external circumstances, but come from cultivating inner peace and wisdom. And in that dialogue, the Buddha emphasizes that only Dhamma practice offers true refuge.
And those qualities not only benefit us, but also ripple outward and positively impact those around us.
So it's not about escaping from the world, but rather engaging with it in a more skillful and compassionate way.
That's a powerful shift in perspective, and it really highlights the transformative potential of these practices. They're not just about retreating into a cave and meditating, they're about bringing the fruits of that meditation into our daily lives.
And using those fruits to create a more peaceful, just, and compassionate world.
Exactly. So as you continue to reflect on these practices, think about how you can apply them not only for your personal growth, but also for the benefit of others.
That's a wonderful challenge to leave our listeners with, to ponder how these ancient practices can guide us toward a more meaningful and fulfilling life, both for ourselves and for all beings.
Indeed. May we all find the wisdom and courage to embark on this journey of liberation together.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. It feels like we've just scratched the surface of these incredibly rich and transformative practices.
There's always more to explore. But for now, perhaps the most important takeaway is simply to remember the power of these practices and the potential they hold for each of us to cultivate inner peace, to face life's challenges with wisdom and courage, and to live with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning.
Beautifully said. And remember, the journey towards liberation isn't about achieving some distant goal, but rather about transforming our relationship with each present moment.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, that wraps up another deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts open.